I can't hear her.
Sorry, everyone. I was muted. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ocean Labs special live broadcast straight from the super remote waters of the San Ignacio Lagoon down in Mexico. Today, we'll embark on a journey to discover the awe-inspiring world of one of the ocean's most majestic creatures, the gray whale. Special thank you to Mike Lever and the entire Nautilus team for making these programs possible. I'm Kylie, your moderator today on this exciting adventure, coming to you live from the coast of Baja California. Each year, this incredible lagoon serves as a sanctuary to the magnificent gray whales during their annual 12,000-mile round-trip migration between the Arctic and Mexico. Here in the protected waters of the San Ignacio Lagoon, they find refuge to breed, to give birth, and to nurture their young. We're going to meet up with some pretty incredible researchers today who are out currently on the lagoon as we speak to learn even more about gray whale biology, ecology, and learn a little bit what it looks like to be a marine biologist. If we're lucky, hopefully we'll get to see a couple whales. Just a reminder, we're coming to you live from a very remote part of Baja California, so if the video looks a little bit lower quality than your favorite TV shows, that's why. We welcome your questions. Just submit them using the Q&A icon down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can in the last 10 minutes of the show. All right, I'm going to turn it over to our host, Dr. Chris Lowe of CSU Long Beach, and our resident marine mammal expert, Dr. Gwen Goodman-Lowe. How's the lagoon looking today, guys?
Hi, Kylie. It's beautiful here this morning. We are here at the absolutely phenomenal San Ignacio Lagoon, which is located halfway down the Baja Peninsula. And the Baja Peninsula was formed about 5 to 10 million years ago. So it's a relatively new area. And basically what happened was the Pacific plate moved north while the North American plate pushed underneath it to create the Baja Peninsula and the Sea of Cortez. So we're about halfway down, and there's a series of lagoons here that are amazing. They're actually huge and vast, but they're here specifically because of these gray whales. And this is a nursery, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Gwen Goodman-Lowe, who's our marine mammal expert, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the gray whales here. Gwen, why the gray whales?
Oh, wow. Well, the gray whales are here because this is the perfect place for them to mate and give birth. So the moms come down here, and the lagoon's really shallow, relatively shallow, and warm. And so the moms have their babies here, and they raise their babies for about 3 months before they have to head back north to feed. And the males also come down and mate with females that do not have the babies. And so it's a perfect place for that to happen because it's, like I said, relatively shallow and pretty warm here.
So I'm just a shark guy, and I run the shark lab at Cal State Long Beach, and I've been studying sharks, but I really don't know very much about whales.
Huh.
So I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn, and she's going to teach us a lot more. So these gray whales are mammals like us. So what makes them mammals?
Wow. Well, so you just said they were like us. And so there are a few things that make a mammal a mammal. One thing is that they are warm-blooded, so they have warm blood coursing through their veins. They also have fur or hair at some stage of their life. Sal, not you. Okay, you lost yours.
I lost
mine.
Yep.
They have mammary glands. That's the main thing. So they feed their young milk through their mammary glands. They have internal reproduction, and they give birth to live young. So very, just like us. Just think of us. Whatever we have, they have, except they're missing the fur. So, but they do have fur when they're in their mom's uterus. So they do have fur or hair in the beginning, but then they lose it because they're in the water all the time. And fur would not be very good for them to be in the water all the time.
Sure. So they're using these lagoons, and they're not even eating it.
That's right.
They go all the way to Alaska to eat.
That's right.
And then they tank up.
Yeah.
And then they swim all the way back down here
Yeah.
just to mate and to calve.
Yes.
So
That's correct.
they don't eat here.
No, they don't. Well, they can, but they don't usually eat here. They might eat a little bit, snack here or there.
Okay.
But for the most part, their main food that they like to eat is up in Alaska, the Bering Sea. So they have to, like you said, they have to go up there and they put on, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of blubber. over the summer months, and then they come down here in the winter and they don't really feed that much.
Oh, okay, so blubber
Blubber.
is what's carrying them over. That's the
That's right.
nutrition source, right?
That's right.
But it also is really important for keeping them warm. So when I touch this water, it's feeling a little chilly.
Chili.
If I was to spend an hour in there, I would probably be
Freeze.
freezing.
That's right.
So how do they use blubber as food and also to stay warm?
That's a great question. So blubber is really good insulator. So it's like having on a winter coat for them. And so it has some blood supply in there, and it's got fat cells in there. And again, it's like having on a big, thick winter coat. But they also can metabolize that blubber and use that as energy over the course of the time that they're down here and when they're migrating.
So it's kind of like a giant lunchbox that they wear.
It's kind of like a giant lunch. It's like if you could wear your big, thick winter coat and eat it,
Oh, okay.
you know, maybe we
That'd be
should,
gr-
maybe we should do that.
Maybe.
Maybe we should invent that.
So, but that blubber layer also helps them.
Stay up to the surface, right? Because remember, one of the things that a mammal does is breathe air. And
That's
so
right.
they have to come to the surface to breathe air every so often, depending on species. And so that blubber actually helps keep them afloat.
So if I pour oil on top of water, it floats. Why?
It's less dense. And so therefore the blubber is less dense than the rest of their body cells. And that's why it helps keep them up.
So it's a food source,
Food source,
it's an insulator,
insulator.
and it helps. It's like a life jacket.
Exactly.
But
But
when-
that you can eat. A life jacket that you can eat.
exactly. But when they get down here, they've been eating their life jackets.
That's right.
And they're here, they're not really feeding, maybe a little snacking. So what happens to their blubber?
Their blubber, they eat it. Their blubber gets metabolized and it goes away. It gets less and less over the course of the winter season.
But they're losing a little of their insulation.
Yeah.
So, but here the water's really much warmer
Right.
than when they're up in Alaska where the water's really
Yeah,
cold.
yeah.
But then they're eating a lot.
And they're also moving here, right? I mean, they're moving around, right? So you know that when you're moving around, you get warm, right? So they're not just, I mean, they do rest, but for the most part, they're moving their tail, they're moving their pectoral flippers. So, you know, that helps keep them warm.
So now where did whales come from? What did they evolve from?
Oh, well, whales came from an animal that is similar to the present day hippopotamus. And that happened,
Hippopotamus.
yeah, that happened about 400 million years ago. The hippopotamus started, like animals, started moving into the water, maybe for competition.
Sorry.
Right there.
Sorry, there's a whale
Yeah,
right there.
Right there. And they started moving into the water, and they were small, and they lost their limbs and they lost their tail, and things became flippers, and they were relatively small. And then about 34 million years ago, the whales evolved from this animal that was similar to a hippopotamus. So they made their living in the water. And then about 4.5 million years ago, we had an ice age, and the prey got really, you know, more abundant. And so that's when they became really, really large and became the great whales that we know today.
So having a bigger body with more blubber also enables them to stay
Stay
warmer,
warmer,
which they
right.
needed during the ice age because the water was cold.
That's right. Yeah.
So a big body, and how big do whales get? What's the biggest whale?
The biggest whale is the blue whale, and that gets to be, it can be up to 110 feet long and something like 450,000 pounds. So that's the largest whale. Gray whales are not quite that big. They get to be about 49 feet long and 90,000 pounds.
Well, so how big are they at birth?
Oh man, when they're tiny at birth. So they only weigh about 2,000 pounds. That's pretty small, and about
A
50,
blow. There's a blow right there. You see it? So what is
about 15 feet long.
sorry.
Okay.
What is that blow? What's actually happening?
So remember that they breathe air, right? So when a whale comes to the surface, they have to release the carbon dioxide, just like us. So they release the carbon dioxide, and that blow is coming out of their nostrils, which are on the top of their head. They're called blowholes, and that it releases some water vapor. Oh, there's two more right there. Releases some water vapor, and it collects also some mucus and oil that are on the top of their head, and that's what that blow is. And because they have two blowholes, it makes a really distinctive shape that looks like a heart. So gray whales are known to have a heart-shaped love just in time for Valentine's Day.
Exactly. In fact, there's some probably a little bit of dating going on over there.
Some dating.
Yeah, see, two flukes.
Yeah.
So what is a fluke and what does that do?
So the fluke is the tail and it's in a horizontal plane and that helps them move through the water. So they use that to kind of maneuver and they use it to swim. That's what propels them through the water.
But it doesn't have bones in it, right?
No bones. Well, it does have bones going down right the center. That's the end of their vertebrae, the end of their spinal column.
Okay.
So their backbone, but nothing in the tail flukes themselves.
So what makes that stiff enough to swim?
Cartilage, kind of like our nose. So it's real, like the end of your nose is real stiff. That's exactly what's in there.
And that's why they kind of flex.
They
and-
can, they can
and
flop
move a
around.
little bit. Okay.
And that helps them turn, right? Because
Right.
if they were, stiff like an airplane, airplanes have the big wings, right? And that helps them bank, but the maneuverability of it actually allows them to turn.
They look so graceful in the water. Look right there. Look right there. Oh, see?
Oh, nice tail. That's
Yeah.
great. Tail fluke.
That's
Yeah,
great tailing.
yeah.
So back to breathing. So the blowhole spews whale snot.
Yeah, you could call it whale snot, yeah, but
Okay.
it's not really snot. 'Cause
Okay.
It's not coming out of their sinuses like ours is.
Got
It's collecting that oil and mucus on the top of their head, really. So you could call it whale snot, but it's not like our snot, which is, cold, sinus kind of stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, because I got it right in my face.
I know you did.
know.
Yeah, it is oily though, so it's a little bit hard. And sometimes if they've been feeding, it can smell real bad.
Oh, really? So they don't brush their baleen.
No, they don't
So,
brush their belly.
let's talk about feeding.
Okay.
So how do gray whales eat?
So gray whales have a type of structure called baleen. So there's two types of whale.
Oh, right there, right there.
Woo! So there's two types of whales. There's toothed whales and dolphins, and then there's baleen whales. And gray whales are baleen whales. So baleen whales have this stuff that's like our fingernails coming down off their upper jaw in plates, and they are basically filter feeders. But gray whales really feed off the bottom. So they'll go down on the bottom. Usually they turn on their right side. They'll suck in sediment, mud, and they'll get things like little tiny crustaceans and little tube worms and sometimes krill. And then what they do is they take their tongue, they'll push the water out of their mouths, out through the baleen, like a sieve, like a colander, like when you're making spaghetti.
Yep.
And then they take their tongue and they kind of scrape the food off the inside of the baleen and they swallow it.
And they lick it off.
They kind of lick it off.
So they never brush their baleen.
No, they can't brush their baleen.
And
That
that
would be
gives
a
them-
big toothbrush.
Exactly, but that gives them probably pretty bad breath.
It does give a bad
Oh,
breath. Yeah.
Okay, so the next time I get a blow on me,
Yeah.
but that's not connected to the mouth, right?
It's connected to the mouth. Oh, the blow's not connected
Yeah.
to the mouth, right? So for us, if we're swallowing food, we're eating lunch, and our friend makes a joke, and we laugh, we start to choke because the food went down what we say the wrong pipe, right? But with whales and dolphins, they do not have a connection between their esophagus, where they're swallowing, and their trachea, where they're breathing. So
Oh.
they're completely separate. So what that means is that they can actually take a breath and eat. They can take a breath and swallow at the same time, and they never have to worry about choking.
So even if a friend makes a whale laugh, they don't have to worry about milk coming out of their nose?
No, don't have
Okay.
to worry about
All
milk
right,
coming
that's
out of
good.
their nose.
Oh,
Oh,
breach.
breach.
Holy smoke.
That was great.
So what is a breach?
So-
What was that?
That was so exciting. So a breach is when the whale jumps almost completely out of the water, except for the tail. Sometimes,
Another breach, another breach.
another one.
Wow. That was so far out of
Yeah.
the water. That's crazy.
And they do that. They don't really know why they do that. So the theory is playing or communication, making splashing sounds. But another one.
Oh my
Another one.
gosh, that
Gonna have
was huge.
5 in a row. So they just jump way out of the water, and it seems like the younger ones do it more. So we don't know if it's they're trying to get a mate, or they're just having fun, or they're trying to get barnacles off their bodies. We don't really know why.
So,
Oh, another
Oh,
one. All
look at
right, 4. That's 4 breaches in a row. So
so
you're gonna go for 5.
maybe. So the young ones do it. Could that be part of like learning to play?
It could be
Okay.
building muscle.
Building muscle,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of theories.
Okay, so you know how like puppies get the zoomies?
Yeah.
Could that be like the
Could be.
zoomies for a gray whale?
Could be zoomies, regular zoomies.
All right,
Yeah.
so these whales come and they'll swim through these lagoons. They're hanging out these lagoons. They'll mate. So they come down here and they find dates. So when females mate, are they by themselves? There are a bunch of males in here. How does their
Oh, yes, we have some reproduction going on.
Yes, yes, we
Some
do.
shenanigans happening
There's
right
some
there.
shenanigans.
Oh, okay. So what happens is typically you'll have two males together and they're vying for dominance. So,
Okay.
you know, they're like posturing, hey, I'm the best one. Look at me. I'm stronger, whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's a female there too. And then whoever wins the male contest will get to mate with the female.
Ah,
And the other male kind of hangs around and helps keep them supported because remember, they have to breathe air. So during mating, usually the female might be on the bottom, but she has to come up for air. So the second male will help support them in the water. That was very exciting.
yeah,
to see
yeah.
that.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And that's actually doesn't get seen a lot.
No, I mean, that's, you know, we're getting to see some really cool behaviors with that. We'll call it shenanigans.
Shenanigans. Now, some of the females are here to mate,
Mhm,
but then there are other females that are coming here who are pregnant.
that's right.
Now, where do they go to give birth?
So they go in kind of more in the back part of the lagoon because it's more shallow and it's more warm.
Okay.
And usually when they actually, the process of giving birth, they're going to have a non-related auntie that helps them. Because again, they have to be buoyant, right? They have to be at the surface. So the auntie will help buoy the pregnant female up. And then when the baby is born, the baby has about 15 seconds to get its first breath of air.
That's all.
Yeah, so the auntie has to help support that baby up
Okay.
there. And within about, that was great. Lou.
Whoa.
Within about a half hour or so, the baby can start to swim by itself. You know, the mom is always going to be right next to it. The baby will start to be able to swim and take breaths on its own. And then over the course of a few hours, it will, you know, be able to start to nurse and things like that.
So, nursing.
Nursing.
So these little babies, they grow fast.
They grow
right?
9 pounds an hour.
How is that possible? So how much milk does a baby have to drink?
They drink about 90 gallons of milk a day.
90 gallons. That was more than me and my brother could eat in our cereal.
In a
10
week,
times
yeah.
in a month.
Yeah, in a month. Yeah.
So-
about 90 gallons of milk, taking that in.
And
And,
that-
it's really high in fat. So like the milk you guys drank was probably 4%
Right.
milk fat, you know, the low fat is 2% milk fat. And what they're drinking is 50 to 60% fat. But they have to put on that weight really fast. Because
Okay.
they only really have a few months here, couple months in order before they have to start going back up to Alaska. And so the babies have to get real fat, put on a big blubber layer and strength so that before they can head up to Alaska to feed for summer.
Okay. So if I'm doing some math right, these babies are growing 9 pounds an hour. That's like 60 pounds a day.
Yeah.
They're drinking 90 gallons of milk.
Uh-huh.
90 gallons of milk with 50% fat in it. That means these babies are consuming like 40,000 calories a day.
Yeah.
So a Snickers bar has like 350 calories in it. If you do the math, you go,
Michigan.
wow,
That
that was
amazing.
awesome.
Wow. That was a gift.
Okay, that's just jumping for joy. Has to be.
Yeah.
But I noticed there are these little white things on them. What are those little bumpy white things on them?
So they have two hitchhikers that live on their body. They have barnacles.
Oh,
That was so fun. They have barnacles that live on their bodies that can get scraped off. And then they have the other hitchhiker are these little things called whale lice, which are like little tiny crabs that live around the barnacles. And the barnacles are really
woohoo! There we go. There they are
yeah,
right
you can
there.
really see
You
them
can
there.
see
Yeah,
them.
the yellow
Wow.
things. The yellow things are the barnacles. And the barnacles are really cool because there's one species of barnacle that only lives on the gray whale. Whoa! In fact, it's called the gray whale barnacle. And they, when the babies are born, they have no barnacles on them because they're not transferred from the mom or anything. They actually land on the baby gray whale when the barnacle starts to settle down in its lifestyle. So when the baby whales are first born, they're really clean, they're smooth, there's no barnacles on them. And then as they get older, they get more and more barnacles on them. And every year they come down here, they get more and more barnacles. The lice are actually transferred from the mom to the baby, so that they can have lice like sooner than they get the barnacles on.
Okay. So if it's very, very smooth, we know that's a new.
Yeah, we know it's a
Oh,
newborn.
very
Yeah.
cool.
And the lice are really important because they actually help the gray whale by picking off dead skin, kind of like an exfoliator. And they also will, if there's a wound, they'll actually help clean the edges of the wound. So the whale lice are very important to the gray whale.
Oh, that is so cool. And they can share.
They can
So
share.
if I'm really clean and I've got a lot of lice, I can share it with my buddy.
Yeah, totally.
Sometimes that's not cool at school.
And yeah, that's definitely not cool at school.
All right. So
All right, so you see some flukes, you see some pectoral flippers flopping around. So those are they're in the, you know, the courtship phase right
Yep,
there. So
yep.
they're thinking about it, and they're just hanging around. Oh, we saw some more male parts hanging
Yep,
out there.
yeah.
There we go. So we got two males that are vying for dominance.
So some of that breaching could be males showing off.
Could be males
Which
showing off.
Males do, right?
Or it could be a male saying, "Hey, I won."
Yeah,
Woohoo!
true.
Yeah,
That's
I'm the
very true.
winner. Yeah.
Okay, so this migration that they make, not a short migration, right?
Right, it's the longest marine mammal migration in the world, and so each way is between 5,000 and 7,000 miles one way. And then so it's between 10 and 14,000 miles per year round trip, right? Yeah, and that's the longest migration of any marine mammal. So it's a long way, and the reason is because their food, the best food that they can get, is way up in Alaska, but the best calving grounds are way down here in Baja. And so they really have to make that full migration in order to build up the blubber and then come down and give birth in the winter.
So in that long trek that they make, and they kind of swim constantly.
Yeah,
when
they
they're
swim
going, right?
constantly. Yeah, I think
They
it's
must-
75 miles a day or something like that.
They must
Yeah.
get thirsty.
Oh,
So
they-
do whales drink?
No, they don't actually drink water. So there's very few marine mammals that actually drink water. Manatees are one of them, and so are sea otters. But whales and dolphins, we had a spy hop right there,
Oh.
or a breach. Whales and dolphins actually get their fresh water solely from their food. And when they digest it and they serve fresh water, and that's called another breach. That's called getting metabolic water. So they're very, very efficient. Their kidneys are extremely efficient at conserving that water.
So now that migration, so how do we figure out how these whales have made this?
Whoa,
Whoa,
another
big
breach.
breach.
Yeah, so
So,
exciting.
so researchers, I use the same technology to study the migration of sharks. We can put something called satellite tags on the animals, and satellite tags use radio waves, powerful radio waves. So when the whale's at the surface, it transmits to a satellite in orbit, and it can enable us to get a latitude and longitude when they're at surface. And because they have to breathe, they have to come to the surface. So we can get a GPS signal. So what have researchers found in terms of their migratory path for gray whales?
Well, first of all, for the gray whales, they also use markings on their body to identify individuals, and they have different advantage points or observation points all along the coast. And so during gray whale migrating season, there's people there that are watching and counting them. So we know, who's going where, and, not every gray whale migrates every year. But they do know that on the northbound migration, the gray whales typically tend to hug the coast, especially the moms and babies will hug the coast much more closely because the mom's trying to protect the baby and keep her out of the strong currents and things like that. On the southbound migration, they're trying to make a beeline for these great lagoons. And so they do a more direct route, and that means they're offshore a little bit farther.
So what that probably meant is 150 years ago, these whales were probably easy targets.
They were easy targets. Yeah.
And they got overhunted. So how did that happen?
Well, it's really interesting because when they first found the whales down here, they actually didn't think they were very high quality. Some dolphins down over there too. They weren't very high quality, so they hunted them for less than 10 years, and then they said, yeah, it's not that great. Sperm whale oil is much better. And remember that they used the oil. What they did was they got the blubber, they boiled the blubber down, they rendered it down, and they got oil from that. And that was way before we had electricity. And they use that oil to light lamps and heat homes and things like that. And then I think the sperm whale populations kind of declined enough that they decided, okay, next are the gray whales. And so they would just come in here and hunt the gray whales. And it was, easy getting, right?
Yep.
Easy pickings because they were in here. And there's so many of them, as you could see, it was really easy to catch them.
So how did whales come back?
Well, we protected them.
Okay.
So these gray whales originally had the nickname devilfish. That was because when they were being harpooned, they fought back, they fought back hard. But then the government realized that the numbers were declining pretty rapidly, and so they started being protected. And they actually were protected in about 1949. And so the populations have slowly been coming back. There was a high of 27,000 in the early 2000s, and then since then they've had some ups and downs, but since 2019 they've actually been declining pretty dramatically again, and now we're down to only about 14,500 approximately, and that's only 3 years or 4 years, so that's a pretty dramatic decline.
So they said yesterday, in fact, I forgot to even introduce our guide. So this is Scarlett, our naturalist, and she's been teaching us lots about whales. And we have Captain Adrian, who knows exactly how to find them and knows exactly how to position us so that the whales come to the boats. So they've been doing this a long time. So Scarlett, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and how long you've been here.
I've been here. I'm one of the guides here in the camp. So I come here every season in winter, which it's in January until April. And I've been doing this for 4 seasons here in San Ignacio.
So in Mexico, they really prize their whales, right? They've done a lot to try to take care of them, and they know the importance of these lagoons. So what do they do here to make sure that people that come here to see the whales, we make sure the whales are safe?
So, for example, Mexico is a good example because here was the first sanctuary for the whales. And actually, San Ignacio is one of the most important sanctuary for gray whales. So they protect them because this is a biosphere reserve. But also, here people in the lagoon, like the captains, they decide to have more regulations to have good practices. So we do friendly encounters, or we can see them so they are safe. So we respect them. We need to identify what are the most important behaviors, for example, like mating, or the mothers when they take care of the babies. So the captains here, for example, they learn the behavior, so they know when to approach or when to observe them since far distance. So they really put effort on it.
So what are some of the main things that people ask or learn about when they're here with you out on a trip?
Like basically they learn more about here mating and nursery. And they learn about, for example, the grays, they are very similar like us. For example, the mothers, the first days when the babies are very little, they are quite protective.
Yes.
They have their space, their intimacy. Also, we have some adults, the singles, that because they come here fasting, they don't eat. They are sometimes tired and they need to take rest.
Are
So
they
sometimes,
grumpy too?
sorry?
Are they grumpy too? Because they haven't.
Sometimes they are grumpy at times. So, for example, it's really interesting because depending on every day, we have different weather conditions. So the whales decide like to take naps.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just like us. So
Yes.
you've seen many whales here in all your years, and you've seen many behaviors. But do they have personalities? What are their personalities?
Oh, yes. So one thing that we have learned, especially guides and captains, that we go out 3 times a day, so we get to know them closer. So we realize that these guys, they have personalities like humans.
Mhm.
So for example, some whales, they are introverts, some extroverts. The ones that are extroverts, not all the time they feel social,
Uh-huh.
but they just have different characteristics. Also, another way so we can identify these whales is they have certain marks, certain white pigmentation, their behavior, so we can recognize some of these individuals, especially the mothers and babies, because they stay here for 3 months. The singles, once they mate, they leave the lagoons.
So do they, because they have personalities and they have little family groups, do they ever, get into squabbles? Do they have like some are like, I don't want to be near this one, I'm gonna stay over here, or are they constantly just mingling in the lagoons?
So, for example, with the singles, they want to get to know other whales. So they don't stay just in one lagoon. They will check other lagoons in one season, the singles, because they want to date other singles. But the mothers and babies will hang out mostly here in the lagoons. But once the babies, after they feel strong and they are ready to get out of the lagoon, slowly we will see the babies going in the outer part of the lagoon. So it's really interesting to see that.
Yeah. So, yesterday, how many whales did they count in the lagoon?
So there's a group researchers that they do counts every week. So they count how many whales we have in level because every day we have different numbers coming in, going out. So it's about 192 singles and 8 pairs of mother and calves.
8 pairs.
Mhm.
Okay, but this is the kind of early in the season, right? So there'll be more babies being born. And then when do the singles leave?
So usually this is hard to tell because it's not like we don't know a date for sure, but they are the first ones to leave. So I will say maybe mid-March, more or less. And then we just have we will see. Sorry. And then we will have the last ones to leave are the mommies and babies. Because once the adults are gone, then mothers is like, oh, we have space. So now there's social between the mothers, the babies are training and being playful even with the dolphins. So these ones are the last ones to leave the lagoon.
Oh, very cool. So Gwen, I know that researchers have been studying the vocalizations of whales. We know that things like humpbacks sing. But what about
Right.
gray whales.
So gray whales are not known to have as many songs, but they do make sounds. So they do things like grunts and whistles, and they actually do knocks. So they all like make some knocking kind of sounds. So like you're knocking on the door. And we can actually hear it because it's within our hearing range. It's a little low on our range, but humans could hear it if we were in the water. So
And that they probably use that to talk to each other a
they
little
do,
bit.
yeah. They communicate with each other. They must, the moms and the babies, especially the moms have to communicate danger and,
Yep.
hey, Junior, don't go so far away, that kind of thing. So yeah, they definitely use, but they're not as vocal as humpbacks. So for example, those whales we just saw that were doing the mating dance,
Yeah.
let's just say, or the dominance dance, they might not actually be vocalizing with each other. They're probably just doing behavioral postures and things like that. They're probably not communicating, with sound at that time.
So we see this thing they call spy hopping,
Yeah.
where their heads pop out of the
Yeah.
water. Why do they do that? And is that like a form of communication too?
Probably. We don't really know. It's hard to ask a whale why they're doing it. All they can do is like look at the behavior and see, well, when are they doing the behavior? So they think they're probably looking around. They might be looking for other whales. We know that they do it when they're migrating and they think that that's a navigational tool. But a lot of times the interesting thing is they're not even putting their eye all the way out of the
Oh.
water. And so they're not really sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we see that quite a bit on some days. Today, there's been
Yeah.
fewer spy hops, but a lot
A lot
of
of
breaches.
reaching, yeah.
So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we get time for questions. So Kylie, do we have any questions?
We do have quite a few questions this morning, and we got more coming
Hi.
in as we speak.
I love questions.
Start. How long can gray whales hold their breath?
Oh, that's a good question. So gray whales are not the deepest breath holders or the longest breath holders. Typically, the longest they can hold their breath is about 20 minutes. But usually, especially when they're learning, it's 3 or 4 minutes at a time. But they can dive down and hold their breath for about 20.
Wow.
While they're feeding, they'll do that.
So I think my record is like two minutes.
About a minute and a half.
So that's pretty impressive. So, but these whales don't go as deep as other whales, right?
Right. They're really more coastal because their prey are not open water pelagic things. They really need to dive down to the bottom. So they're very coastal species. So they'll dive down to about maybe 30 meters or 100 feet, something like that, but definitely coastal.
All right, Kaylee, more questions. That was a great one.
Very cool. Henry wants to know how long gray whales live.
Ooh.
Henry, good question. So typically they live somewhere between like 55 and 70 years old, but they did a necropsy, which is like an autopsy for animals, on one recently, and they determined from the earplugs, they can look at how the earplugs are laid down. They found that they were this one was over 80 years old. So somewhere, we'll just say somewhere on average about 70 years old.
So speaking of that, they have an eye that sometimes we can see when th're really close. So, but when they spy hop, sometimes their eyes come out. Can they see in both water and air?
They can. They have a really great adaptation where they can actually move with muscles in their eye. They can move the lens, change the shape of the lens. So it's kind of like squinting and not squinting. So the lens will get flattened and rounder. And so they can actually see in both air and water. So I don't know if you ever dove like in
Yeah.
a pool without your goggles on.
Can't see
You
anything.
can't see anything. So we actually can only see well in air. We can't really see in water at all unless we have mask over our eyes. But dolphins and whales can see in both air and water, and that's that really special adaptation.
I want whale eyes. Okay, and of course their blowhole is their nostril,
Their blowholes are nostril
And they
on the
keep
top of their head.
and they usually keep that closed when they're underwater. So how do they smell?
They don't have a good sense of smell.
Okay.
They do not have a good sense of smell, but they don't really need it, right? Because they're underwater most of the time. So, why?
Well, maybe spy hopping, they can take in a little
I mean, yeah,
vapor, yeah.
they might be able to.
But they also have an ear, but the ear is located where?
The ear is located in their head, way in their head. They don't have an external ear thing like we do. So,
No Q-tips
no
necessary.
tips necessary. It's buried way down in there, but they have the same ear structure, internal ear structure that we do. And so what they're doing is they're sensing vibrations in the water. And that's actually what our ear does too. It's sensing vibrations in air, sound waves that hit the inside our ear. And that's how we hear as well.
But because low frequency sounds travel better through water, particularly seawater, than air, they're probably listening for low frequency sounds,
Yes.
some of which we might not even be able to hear.
Right. And their communication is low frequency sounds as well. Yeah,
Good, good.
definitely.
All right, so we've got the eye, we've got the nose, we've got the ears, but they have these little bumps because they don't really have hair, but they have these little,
Dimples.
whisker bumps.
They're
Yeah.
dimples. So
Yeah.
they-
So what are those?
They have dimples all over their head, and each dimple has one individual very stiff hair. And what that does is it senses the environment. So it can sense like which direction is the water flowing and things like that. And because it moves and it gives them a signal.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, Henry, that was a great question. Kylie, you got more?
Oh my goodness, we have so many questions coming in. Okay, let's continue with how do whales sleep?
How do whales sleep? So whales are mammals, so they need to sleep too. But because they're floating in the water all the time and they really can't sink, they actually have to keep a little part of their brain on. So they've done studies and they found in dolphins turn off half their brain and half the brain rests and the other half is alert. And so they think that whales do the same thing. So, and then they'll switch. So the other half of the brain will go to sleep and the other one that was alert will become alert. And that way, if there's any danger, any predators, anything like that, the whole brain, the whole body wakes up and then they can say, come to the surface to breathe things.
Great question. Give us another.
Very cool. All right, we have a number of questions about how they eat, so I'll ask you a couple. We
Okay.
want to know how many teeth they have to eat, what kind of fish do they like to eat, which I know we talked, they don't eat fish, but we'll answer that. We had a couple people ask what kind of teeth they have.
Okay.
Do they only have one stomach?
Okay, great
Oh,
question.
question.
Okay, so baleen whales do not have teeth. So baleen whales have this flexible sieve-like material that's coming down from their upper jaw, and it's very similar to our fingernails, but in big plates. So they have 0 teeth, and what they are called filter feeders. But in fact, they don't filter so much. They actually filter the sand. So they dive down and they can eat small fish, but their main thing that they like to eat are tiny little crabs called amphipods. And they'll also eat little worms that are in tubes and sometimes krill, which are like shrimp. But in general, they're sucking the sand out of the bottom, which sounds disgusting to me, but they suck sand out of the bottom and they push it out through the baleen with their mouths open, and then they use their tongue to scrape it off. They only have one stomach. So they're just like mammals with one stomach.
But they have to be eating a lot
They
of
have to
those
eat a
things to
lot.
get that big.
Right. Yeah. And, there's not the concentration of amphipods in the sand is not high. So they're
Right.
constantly filtering that sand and grabbing that sand. And so you can always tell which side the gray whale likes to feed on, because the baleen on that side is shorter, gets worn down over time, and it actually is shorter. And that's how we know that most of them like to feed on the right side.
So, but they have to be eating hundreds of pounds.
Hundreds of
those
pounds.
things.
But remember, they're not eating the sand. They're
Right,
getting the sand
right,
out. So
right.
that's hard.
Yeah.
You're getting that in your mouth and it's stuck on your teeth and they don't brush their teeth. So that's hard.
Exactly. So those feeding questions are really important, because understanding how these animals feed will become really important for us to understand how things like climate change is going to affect their health. or whether the populations are going up or down. So any more good questions like that?
Oh yeah. This will be our last feeding question, so we can talk about some other stuff. But
Okay.
Bailey in Midwest City wants to know if they are strictly carnivores or if they're ever omnivorous. Do they ever eat any plants when they're diving down, getting all that mud?
So they're considered planktivorous, but they're mainly carnivores. So they will take their mouths and kind of take kelp in their mouths and move it across the kelp, but they're not really eating the kelp because they can't really digest plant material, and there's no way for them to chew. So really, they're really just taking in very small things that they can swallow whole. So animal-like matter.
Okay, so I have a question, and I'm sure this is on everyone's mind. How do whales poop?
Oh my goodness. Well, whales poop like humans poop.
Okay.
And that is they just release their anus and out it comes.
But
But
is
it's liquid. It's not brown like hard things.
okay. So because I've seen some brown mass coming out, and they probably don't poop a lot because they're not eating.
That's
a lot
right.
here.
They're not pooping a lot here because they're not eating a lot. But the babies do because they're drinking milk, right?
Oh,
So you'll
right,
see-
right.
But it is liquid, and you'll see like just a splash of brown liquid come out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course they have to pee
They have
because
to
they're
pee,
they're getting water from
Right,
their food.
Right.
So those are all the gross things we have to talk about whale
Yeah.
feeding.
Yeah.
What other great questions you got for us, Kylie?
Okay, moving on from whale poop. We have somebody wants to know if gray whales have any predators, and then Henry wants to know how do they defend themselves from those predators.
Okay, great question. So the two predators that gray whales have, there's only two, us humans and killer whales. So for us, they don't really, we have so much technology, they can't really defend themselves from us. But the good news is that they're protected, and the only humans that are allowed to hunt Pacific gray whales now are in Alaska, the Alaska natives. They're allowed to hunt 140 a year, but in the last few years, they've only taken 2. And the good thing about them is that they use the entire whale. They use every single part of the whale, so there's no waste. Orcas or killer whales also like to hunt gray whales, and they typically like to get them when they're on their northward migration. And they're usually trying to get the babies, the calves, because they're not that strong. The way they get around that is it's hard. They don't really have any kind of protection. They don't have spines. They don't bite. They can't bite back. And when they're with their babies, they can't swim that fast. And so they just try to outlast them, really. They try not to drown. They just try to outlast the killer whales. And then hopefully a lot of times killer whales give up, they get bored, and they move on to another one.
But the moms are probably very defensive of their babies.
They're very defensive of their babies.
And we've actually had whales that were curious of the boat and actually moved the boat. So they're very powerful.
Yeah, they're very powerful. But killer whales hunt in packs. And so that's the problem, right? If it was one killer whale
Right.
that was a third of their size, it probably wouldn't be an issue. The killer whales are very fast, and they hunt together. They're cooperative hunters.
And they're very
So-
smart.
And they live in their family group. So they've had a long time to practice these things and communicate. So
Yeah, good question.
Kylie, what else do you have for us?
All right, let's talk about the babies. How many babies can they have at one time, and how long does it take a baby to become an adult whale?
Okay, great question. So they have one baby at a time. Twins are very rare. I think they've only been found in the historical record once or twice, and the twin never makes it. So they only have one baby, and they have a baby every 2 to 3 years. The baby stays with the mom for about 7 months, and then the mom kicks it out and says, "No more milk for you. You're on your own." So it takes about maybe a year for the baby to not be full grown, but to be big enough to be on its own. And then over time, over the next several years, it'll grow bigger and bigger. They don't get to be sexually mature until they're about 6 or 7. The males are a little bit later than the females, but around 6 or 7 years old, they actually are considered to be full grown, and that's when they can start mating and having their own babies.
Great question.
Did that answer it?
I believe so.
All right.
We
That's
have
a big
so many
one.
great questions coming in. It's hard to decide which ones to do next. Let's talk about migration. We do have a couple questions about migration. People want to know, how do they know where to go? How long is their migration? Do they ever stop swimming? And how fast do they swim?
Okay, so how fast they swim? They're kind of slow swimmers, and I don't know the number offhand. I can't actually remember the number, but I know that when they're migrating, they can go up to about 75 miles a day. So you can figure that out. And especially when the moms and the babies are together, they go a lot slower. How do they know where to go? Well, we think that's one of those things that they're born knowing. They have an innate sense that, oh, it's time for me to leave. There's no more food. I must leave. And remember that they're born down here with their moms, and the mom travels with them to the north. So the mom is actually teaching them where to go on the first year. And then they're following other whales. They don't go in big groups, but they see each other on the migration. So they learn the migration route. And in fact, some whales actually do get lost every once in a while. You'll hear about them in like San Francisco Bay. One time we were from Long Beach, California, and sometimes they end up in the Cabrillo Harbor.
Yeah.
So they do get lost on their way, but in general, they're learning it from others, and there's that innate sense, oh, it's time for me to move on.
And those were male whales that got lost because
Yeah,
they
'cause
refused
never
to ask
asked
for
for
directions.
directions. And wait, what was the other question? It was how far do they go? So depending on where in the Bering Sea they're going and which Baja Lagoon they're going to, it's somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 miles one way. So 10 to 14,000 miles round trip. I think that was it.
That's a
So they answered-
long
yeah,
migration.
very long.
Great question.
And then on that migration, do they ever stop swimming? Do they take a
Do they
break?
ever stop swimming? Well, they do rest, yeah. So this logging behavior that we're seeing a little bit around here, that's called logging because they kind of look like a floating log in the water. They are resting that, so they're not swimming continuously, but they do have to rest. So
But there's no dawdling.
no dawdling.
When
They
they
gotta go.
leave, they're
Yeah.
like not gonna stop
Yeah.
to sightsee.
right, right.
They're heading, lagoons are heading north.
Yeah, especially the moms and the babies, they do have to take rest breaks
Yeah.
because the babies just are not, they're not an adult. They're 15 feet long, maybe 19 feet long when they leave here. So they're relatively small compared to the 49-foot adult. So they do need rest breaks.
Questions.
All
What
right.
else?
How heavy is a gray whale's heart?
Oh, that is such a good question. All right, the gray whale's heart is, are you ready for this? About 285 pounds. So our heart is about 2.5 ounces, about fist size. The blue whale heart is 400 pounds, size of PW.
Wow. That's
Right.
huge.
So it's very, very, very large. And they can pump blood about, what did I say? I can't remember now. 60 gallons per beat.
Per beat.
We pump about a couple ounces of blood per beat. So they are very efficient and with very large hearts. Yeah.
So the whole goal of that is to hold as much oxygen
Right.
in that blood as possible.
Right.
Get it out to those
Right.
tissues.
They have a very large blood volume, and the blood is what's holding the oxygen, and that's what allows them to dive down deep and hold their breath for so long. Another cool fact is their brain. So our brain is, I can't remember
7
now.
pounds.
7 pounds?
Yeah.
Our brain 7 pounds
7 pounds.
from the movie. Their brain is about 9 pounds, and the blue whale brain is about 15 pounds
15 pounds.
for the
Wow.
blue whale. So
Yeah.
theirs is about 9 pounds. So pretty big, pretty heavy. They have a big head to keep it in.
That is a big brain.
Big
All
brain.
right,
It's big.
about 5 more minutes for questions, so let's get in some more. We have,
Okay.
Rosie wants to know, how can you tell the difference between male and female whales?
Okay, that's a really good question. Well, female whales, gray whales in particular, are larger than male gray whales, but the only way you could really tell that is if they were laying side by side. So there is another way, and that is if you can look at the stomach of the whale, the ventral surface, you can see a pattern. And the females have a very long slit where their reproductive organs are, and they have 2 little slits on either side where their mammary glands are located. So, and they're always tucked in unless they're feeding. And then the males have 2 slits, smaller slits. They have one for their reproductive organ and one for their anus, and they don't have those extra little slits because the males don't have functioning mammary.
So the purpose of keeping everything in the slits is to make them hydrodynamic.
Right, so that they're very efficient swimmers, correct.
So smart.
So the mammary glands really only come out just a tiny bit when they're feeding their babies.
But the babies can't because they don't have lips.
Right,
So how do they nurse?
it's such an interesting thing. So the babies, actually, the moms will pump the milk out of their mammary glands instead of, because the babies they can't really like suckle like a human can. So the moms will actually pump out the milk right when the baby gets close to get it into their mouth. Oh, so exciting.
Wow.
Look at that. Very cool.
Let's get through a
All right,
couple.
Kyle, I'm sure we got more.
We have a funny question from Aiden. He wants to know, how can whales turn half their brain off, but we cannot? I would also like to know that because I'd like to turn half my brain off too.
I think we would all like to know that. I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that, but remember, our brain is two halves, and we have something called the optic chiasma that connects the two halves together. So that's why they say, like, some people are right-brained and some people are left-brained. I think it's artists and creative people, typically they say, are left-brained, and people that are like math-oriented are right-brained. So humans do have two sides of their brain. We just turn the whole thing off together when we're sleeping. We don't do the half and half. And I don't know if anybody knows how they can do that. That's a great question.
And the thing is it's not just whales that do that.
Right.
So it turns out that some birds do that.
Right.
Animals that continuously have to move
Right, have to be alert.
have to
yeah.
have the ability to
Right.
turn off half their brain
Right.
at a time
Right.
so that they can rest. Because
Right.
the brain is a very expensive organ in terms of the amount of energy it needs. So we've found, we found that even white sharks can do this.
Oh,
That even
no.
white sharks can turn off half their brain
We
because they
need to talk about sharks.
I know, but they have to be able to swim in order to breathe. So I always get that question, how do sharks sleep? And the thing is, they probably do it the same way
Right.
whales do. We just don't know exactly how they do it.
Right.
So I'm going to make a thinking cap for sharks and whales so we can measure their brain waves.
It's a
Isn't that
great
cool?
idea. Yeah, it'd be
So
really cool.
hopefully some student will figure out how to do that,
Yeah.
and then they'll be able to answer that question.
All right, guys, let's go. We'll do our last question. Alex,
Okay.
wants to know, what is the difference between whales and dolphins?
Okay, that's a great question. So, whales and dolphins are a little bit different, although the largest dolphin is actually the killer whale. So the dolphin family is actually a group of organisms that are very closely related to each other. And then the other whales are in different families. So again, the killer whale is the largest dolphin in the dolphin family. And then whales are very closely related, but they're in their own families. And remember, there's two types of whales. There are the toothed whales and dolphins. So all dolphins have teeth. The killer whale has teeth, the sperm whale has teeth, false killer whales have teeth. And then there's the group of with a fewer number of species, and those are the baleen whales that only have the baleen, and that's what the gray whale is.
So along those lines, those groups diverged evolutionarily, right?
They did, yeah.
So the toothed whales, are they more modern?
No, they diverged at the same time, apparently.
Really?
Yeah, so they just when that plankton came, the baleen whales decided, well, they were gonna like feed off that plankton, and so we had the baleen whales. So they diverged about 3.4 million years ago.
Wow, that's pretty recent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Relatively recent. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. These are great questions.
All right, guys, I think we are just getting to our hour, so we're just
Okay.
on. We'll let you guys say goodbye, and then we'll head out.
Thank you, Kylie. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah. Thank you all. Great questions. I hope you enjoyed it. If you ever get a chance, you got to come here and see it for yourself because it is absolutely amazing. We have to thank our guide, Scarlett, who is awesome, and our captain, Adrian.
Bye.
And then we hope to see you on future programs with the Ocean Lab.
All right. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. Just a reminder, we will be sending out some extra content after the show. We did have a couple questions that we didn't have time to get to, so we'll send those out as well and answer those for you afterwards. But as always, thank you for joining us today. We're glad that we got to see a couple whales with you, and we'll see you next time.